we will be doing a little bit of comparison. The funny thing is that sometimes when you write small, code and you test it, you can do something in one programming language, and then you can do the same thing in another programming language, and the results kind of result. Well, the end result is the same, of course, if you want to try to solve the same problem, but also the code can be remarkably alike. And so I just had this talk together with a few of my students, and I wanted to share this with you. So let's see if we can get this show off the ground and play this thing for you. So if you have any questions, then just go on and ask them in chat. I will be monitoring that, of course. And here we go. Right. Welcome, everyone. Yesterday, or in another recording, sorry, I introduced you to the idea of test-driven development. We went through a very simple scenario where we were building a piece of software that allowed us to play the FizzBuzz game. And for those of you who do not know what FizzBuzz is, it's a numbers game where you substitute each number that is divisible by 3 by the word fizz, a word that can be divided by 5 without any fractions. It's supposed to be substituted by the word buzz, and any number that is divisible by 15 is supposed to be substituted with a word FizzBuzz, right? And you can build a small algorithm around that. And we did that yesterday. We did that in Ruby, the Ruby programming language, and we used RSpec to test that, or test drive that development. We wrote a test or a series of tests, and then we started to run those tests, and then make sure that we wrote a little bit of code to make each and every test pass. And at the end of the session, and it took, I don't know, in terms of coding, it took 20-25 minutes, something like that. We had a small function that helped us to that actually did what it was supposed to do. It handled each number submission and checked it and returned the words or the number itself. And this session is actually part 2 of the same thing. So I will not go through the benefits of testing or the implementations of that. You can watch that recording if you're interested in those topics. What I will show you, however, is that we can apply the same principles to another programming language. Right? We did this in Ruby yesterday, and today we will do the same thing, but we will do it in JavaScript. And of course, the reason why I want to show you this is to showcase that there are big similarities between programming languages, and also that you can use these processes of test-driven development and then further down the line, behavior-driven design, independently of what technical stack you are working on. Okay, these are general principles. So let's see if we can make that happen. Now, what I have here, this is my GitHub GitHub account, and what I have here, I pushed up the code from yesterday to GitHub. It's on my account, Tochman, FizzBuzz 2021, and we can see that there are very few tests here. This is, again, just the first iteration. We are not testing for any edge cases or SAT paths or anything. We're just testing the functionality here. And we are requiring the implementation file, of course, because the test needs to know about what we are supposed to test. We are creating a subject, and I told you yesterday that you don't necessarily have to do it, because RSpec will take care of that anyway. And then we have 4 different tests, meaning that we're in the first test, we're just supposed to return the number if no of the game conditions are met. and then we'll return fizz if we can divide this number by 3. So we just pass in 3 into this check method, and so on and so forth, right? So we saw this yesterday, and this is pretty straightforward. Do we have any questions about that? The testing part? No. All right, so we're going to take a look at real quickly on the implementation, which is in my source folder, and we have this class here that is the fizzbuzz class, and we have a function or a method that is called check, and then we have a series of if statements here, just checking whether you can divide this this number that we're passing in with any of these 3 numbers, 15, 5, and 3, and that there are no decimals. So we're using the modulus modulus operator, right? So that's pretty straightforward. Now, all of this can be done in JavaScript, of course. You could be done in any programming language. But the interesting part here is that we can write this in JavaScript and actually make it look like almost like this implementation. There will be small differences, but not many. Okay. So let's see if we can pull up our terminal somewhere. Yes, we can. Let's just cd right, and this will be a little too big perhaps, so let's just make it so you guys can see what I'm doing here, and just plus this a few times. Right. Okay, and I'm gonna cd into my Craft Academy folder and demos, and I will create a folder called Fizz Buzz JS, and I'm going to test it with Jest. Jest is a testing framework for JavaScript applications. There are many testing frameworks that you can use, but we're going to use Jest in this case. Right, so I'm going to cd into this thing, and I'm going to initialize a yarn project in here, and I'm just going to answer yes. So when you do yarn init, you get a series of questions. We don't want to answer all of them, so we just pass in this Y flag, and that is all done. So if I do ls now, we see that there's a package JSON thing here, right? Which means that I need to say on, yeah, add as a development dependency, I want to add Jest to it because it's not included in JavaScript anyway. So we're just gonna install this guy like this, and the package JSON, just to make comparisons to what we did yesterday, is the same thing as the gem file, almost the same thing as the gem file in your Ruby projects, right? You list your dependencies, but in package JSON you also do a little more than that. You can add some scripts and you can add more metadata about your project. So it's not exactly the same thing, but it kind of overlaps what they are doing. Anyway, let's just move out of this and pop this open in our code editor. That should pop up here somewhere, right? And our goal today is to replicate the same thing that we did yesterday, but in JavaScript, right? So if you look at the project itself, we did have a spec folder and we had a source folder, right? So the source folder was where we actually placed our implementation code, and the spec folder is where our tests reside, right? So let's do the same thing. Oh, sorry, that was the wrong one. Let's do the same thing here. Let me just check my memory usage because I'm getting some weird. Hold on a second. Oh, come on. Oh, we should be okay. I have good memory, but it's a bit weird. Anyway, okay. Anyway, let's just create create a new folder, and we're going to call it spec, and then we're going to create another folder, and we're going to call it source, right? SRC. And so in my package JSON, I will set up my test runner. So we can see that we have a dependency installed here, which is the jest package. And here I'm just gonna add scripts, and here I will just say test, and in the test script I will just say jest, and I will, out of experience, I will just tell Jest that even if we don't have any tests, I want to go have a green green output. So I'm just going to say pass with no tests, and I will also pass in another flag saying root dir should be spec. So that's because otherwise Jest comes pre-configured to look in a different folder, a folder that does not exist in our project, so that would render an error. In this case, we just want to say that we want Jest to look into the spec folder for any tests. We do not have any tests here, right? But nonetheless, I'm just going to run this. So I'm going to say yarn test just to see if Jest is properly configured or not. And it says no tests found exiting with code 0. This is exactly what I was looking for at this stage, at least, right? Oh, so jag jobbar just nu. Sorry, guys. Home with kids. Right. He got me off track a little bit, but that's okay. So let's just create a spec. You guys remember, we always want to create our test files first because we want to do a little bit of thinking. So we're going to create a new file in the spec folder, and I'm going to call it fizzbuzz spec. And I'm going to use camel case in my file names today, because in JavaScript we use camel case rather than snake case. Snake case is the casing with where you have a word and then an underscore between words rather than a space, whereas camel case is this: you start with a small one and then you use a big one as the second word. That is camel case. Then there is another case that is called Pascal case, and that would be a capital F in the beginning. This would be called Pascal case. But I will be hammering these things into your brains later on.
Don't forget kebab case.
And kebab case is the funniest one, right? Kebab. Does anyone know what kebab case is? No, kebab case is this: fizz dash buzz. If you don't have an underscore, but rather a dash, because it looks like a kebab, like a shish kebab, for some reason. I don't know. I don't know if that is the appropriate way of saying, but kebab case is used by many people as a thing. So right. So we're gonna say fizzbuzz dot, and here I'm saying dot spec dot JS. This is a difference between this implementation and Ruby, because we use an underscore yesterday, right? So this is the thing I want to create, and I'm going to say I have to require the file that I will be testing. I haven't created that file yet, and I haven't created a class or anything like that. But still, since this is test-driven development, we plan ahead and we can do things. So if we take a look at our RSpec implementation in this fizzbuzz spec, we did require this fizzbuzz thing from the source folder, and this is exactly what we're going to do here as well. So I'm going to say const fizzbuzz will be the name of the class, and I'm using Pascal case on this one, equals require, and then just a string, and the same thing goes here, dot slash src slash and then it will be fizz buzz.js. Right. And come on, get lost. There's something wrong with my computer. I don't know what's going on, really. And then we want to create a subject, right? Because we want to have something to test. Very similar to what we did here. In RSpec, you don't have to do it. In Jest, you actually have to. Jest doesn't create a subject automatically for you. So we're going to say const subject equal, oh, sure, sorry. Const subject equal, and we have to instantiate a new object based on the FizzBuzz class. So I'm just going to say new FizzBuzz like this, right? And this is a different programming language, so we do it slightly different. In Ruby, you put the dot new afterwards. Here we do something else, right? And then I can say it. You know, there's an it block here as well. It looks slightly different than the ones that we used in Ruby, because it has a callback, a JavaScript function as a callback. You pass in a block in Ruby. But I'm going to just copy this text because I can't be bothered with typing it. So this will be our first test, right? Is expected to return a number if no game conditions are met. And if we take a look at this code here, this will look pretty much the same in our Jest implementation. What I want to do now is to say expect subject dot check, and then pass in 1. And here the matcher is slightly different, but it will look familiar to you anyway. So I would say 2 equal, and then 1. Right? If you look at this code and you look at this code, it's pretty much the same thing. It's a slight difference in syntax, but it's not very different, I would say. Right. So now I can copy this guy. Well, I forgot one thing. Sorry about that. I need to add a describe block. So FizzBuzz, right, like this, and I need to move these guys in, this guy inside, right, and then I can now, you know, so the describe keyword, our describe block is also important. We have this describe here. I missed that. I'm sorry. I got a little bit carried away. And so now I can just paste this a few times and basically copy all of this. Since I'm redoing this the same thing in JavaScript, so I can just copy these messages like this. Nothing extraordinary. And we need to change this to 3, and we need to change this to a 5, and we need to change this to a 15. Right. So that's the entire test file for us to be in the same stage as we were before, right?
Should you change it like to FizzBuzz and stuff to equal?
Of course I should. So, thank you. Somebody's paying attention. That's good. So this one should say fizz, and this should say buzz, and this one should say FizzBuzz. Of course. Now we are in a good state, right? Okay. And again, yesterday when we did this, we also discussed what should happen, yada yada, and all of this stuff. Now today we're just refactoring this thing, so we are already past the mental process, you know, and the thinking about our check functionality and so on. But so let's run this, right? as we did yesterday, we will start running this test. We will get a series of errors, and this is really important to do, of course, because you want to get acquainted with the errors syntax, like what is Jest actually doing for us. Because yesterday RSpec was pretty generous in telling us what's going on, what sort of an error we are encountering. Let's figure out if Jest is as verbose and as easy to use as RSpec. So let's just head over to our terminal, and we're just going to do yarn test, right? And we will get some red output. The first one is, of course, that this file simply doesn't exist, right? So we're going to fix that. Right, so we go into our source folder, and we're going to create a new file, and we just call it fizzbuzz.js, okay? And let's run this again. Right, and now he is on line 3. He doesn't complain about this anymore. He's saying that I cannot instantiate a new fizzbuzz class. Okay, then we can fix that. So we can just say class fizzbuzz, and we can add a block, and then we can just say module exports equals fizzbuzz. Right. So we have a class definition. We can use classes in JavaScript. Usually we don't, but in this case we will, just to prove a point, right? We have a class definition, and we are exporting this class, so it should be able to be imported by our test file and used. Let's see what that does for us. We clear this up, and we run this again, and we will get another error, hopefully. Right. Now we are past this. We can instantiate an object, with this, but we cannot run it. I mean, there's no check function on this, right? That's what we are complaining about. I think we have, right, exactly, type error, subject text check. Subject check is not a function. So subject exists, but there is no check function, right? So let's fix that. Let's go over to our file and add a check function. So this is a class, so I can just, I don't need to have a constructor in this version of JavaScript. So I can just say check function and just a block, and that's about it. This is the bare minimum I need to do in order to change the error message. So let's do that. But this time around, I don't want to run all the specs, because this this output is a little too big for me. I'm only interested in running one. You remember in RSpec, we can say colon and the line number. Here we need to do this. We have to say dot only on this particular it block. And now I should be able, hopefully, to run this, and that should run only one test for me. Right. We skipped the others. You see, we have 3 skipped files, but he doesn't complain about not finding the check function, but rather that it got something undefined, and he expected to get 1. Now, do you remember, if you were playing, if you do remember, there's so much info being conveyed to you, but yesterday when we tried to do that at this stage, we got another error message saying that it got 1 argument but expected 0 arguments, because we are passing in 1, but that RSpec and Ruby was actually paying attention to that. JavaScript doesn't. We are passing in 1, but we are not allowing this this function to take any arguments. You see, there's nothing here. Yet JavaScript does not complain about that. Okay, so we need to, and this is a bit, it's not a flaw in any way, but it's a different behavior right than in Ruby. But what I want to say is to say value or number or whatever. Let's call it, I think we called it number yesterday. I think we did, right? So we're gonna write the same thing, right? This is the implementation, right? We called it a number. You see, we have a class and we have a function. It's the same thing in JavaScript, but basically, but we're using slightly different syntax. So we're gonna call it a number, and we're gonna have this guy return a number, the number, like this. Now in Ruby, you can omit the return keyword. In JavaScript, you can't. You actually have to say that you want to return something. So if I now run my test, that particular test, we should be good actually on that part. We should go green on this. Yes, it is expected to return a number if it doesn't, if no conditions are met, right? So we're green on this. So now we will turn this guy off, and we want to run this guy. There we go. We want to run the one where we're passing in a 3, and we're going to run this, and it will fail because it's supposed to return fizz, but it will return the 3 instead for us. Yes. You see, the key to success here is to read this. Expected fizz received 3. It's very similar output that we got in our spec yesterday, but this is slightly different formatted and so on. But the information contained in is pretty much the same. Okay, so let's fix that. We go over to our fizzbuzz.js, and we just tell this function that we're testing if it's divisible by 3, right? So we can say if, very similar to what we did before. So we have a condition here, and we say that number is, and we can use the modulus here as well. It's the same thing, by 3, then return fizz, and then we just say else, and we just move this guy in here, right? Okay, so let's format our code. It's formatted already. Good stuff. Let's run it.
Does need the conditional? Or
where?
In the F.
This is the condition.
But that it should equal 0.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. Jesus. Thanks. Right. Thanks.
Of course.
Exactly as we do here. And if you look at this, we have the entire solution right here. We can type this up in JavaScript with any problems, right? But let's go through the process of actually running these things. So we want to run the test, and this one should go green for us now. Right. It's expected to return fizz if number is divisible by 3. Okay. So let's just cut this a bit short. So I could just say, if, because we know the solution to the whole thing, right? So if we say number divide by 15, we need to put this first, 0, then we return fizz buzz, and else if. And look, in Ruby, we have this else if keyword. Here we don't have that. So we will say number is, if this is divided by 5 equal 0, then we return buzz, and then else. And then we just move this thing up. And this is the entire solution, right? So we do this 15, 5, and 3, fizz, buzz, buzz, fizz, or the number, and now we can safely just remove this thing from this one. And I have a extension on my VS Code that actually runs my tests, so I don't have to run them in terminal. You see there are some green checkboxes on the side. They have actually already been executed, so I know they will pass, but I will run them for your sake here anyway, because I'm such a nice guy. And there we go. We are going green. Yes, we are going green on the whole thing, right? And what is the takeaway? Well, the takeaway is that programming languages doesn't matter. Concepts matter. You understand? Like, it doesn't matter if you work in Ruby, Python, JavaScript, or anything like that. That in the scripting languages. Of course, if you work with compiled languages like C, C#, or Java or whatever, these solutions will look totally different. But the concepts will also stay the same. But you would have to write more code, and you have to do a lot of other stuff, right? But the interesting thing here is that I write this in a using JavaScript, which means a different language than yesterday, and in a different testing framework. But if you look at it, they are almost exactly the same. There aren't many differences between this code and this code, if you think about it, right? If you look at these and compare these two to each other, they're pretty much the same, right? And you will see those similarities because this way of doing things using describe and it, they return in RSpec, in Jest. We will also use Mocha, which is another testing library, and we will use Cypress, which is also another one. But the concepts and even the syntax is very similar between all of those. And you can do this if you want. There's a few more parentheses and a few more stuff like that here in JavaScript. I would argue that the Ruby implementation is easier to read in a way, but nonetheless, it's just it's just a matter of getting used to some stuff, basically. Right. So, David, did you learn anything today?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, actually, I did. Not the JavaScript part. I knew this. I could do this one before, but yeah.
The concepts are the same.
I'm looking at you here, but my camera is here. Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. I also, Arun, did you pick up anything today?
Yep, I was a little late. I'm sorry for that.
Right. So here we are. We can skip that other part, which is basically the part where we ask people if they picked up any of the skills that we wanted them to pick up during this session. This was a pre-recorded session. I still have the code up on the screen. I very much enjoy having testing as part of my tool belt, whether I do front end or if I do back end development. Now, this was, of course, a very trivial example. I already mentioned that during the stream. But if you are more interested in testing, if you check out my streams and the pre-recorded ones, but also the ones that will will come later on, we definitely gonna write more tested code, and I use Jest for mostly in React. I used it this time around just to test the vanilla JavaScript, or well, it wasn't really vanilla, it was Node.js, but well, it is vanilla JavaScript. But I use Jest for writing components test in React. I use Mocha and Chai for backend testing, like if I build my APIs using Node, for instance. I am actually developing a tool that will make creating Node.js based APIs, RESTful APIs, a bit easier. You can check that out together with me if you want. And also, I do Cypress for front-end testing, independently if I use React or if I use Vue or vanilla JavaScript. And so anyway, I hope that you found this interesting. It was a short stream, pre-recorded session that I had with my students earlier today, and you're more than welcome to come back in. And if you haven't hit that follow button, please do. I appreciate that a lot. And stay safe, stay healthy, and keep on coding. That is important. Build something if you can. The joy of making things happen with code is fantastic. Anyway, that does it for me for now. I'll be back later tonight with some Node.js coding. Cheers.